Good afternoon and welcome to the Wednesday, October 25th Cincinnati Public School Audit Committee. We'll go ahead and I don't really have any opening remarks, so we'll go ahead and get started on our agenda. I'd like to invite Chris Burkhart of the district to discuss with us facilities update as well as this vendor report that we have in front of us.
Yeah, wonderful. I agreed with Chris that I would give him a quick introduction, but I think Danny might have just done that, so that's perfect.
Well, if you'd like to do a further introduction,
yes, I might just
that'd be fine.
Just a bit. So essentially, Chris is agreed to join us today. One of the great ties back to our goals this year is to have visitors from outside your typical audit departments, and I think Chris could almost be a part of the group, how many audits he's already worked on with us this year. So we're really grateful for him to be here today. But the two items that he'll be discussing was the first as a vendor report that was a direct action item from a past audit committee meeting, as well as the facilities needs conversation. And if folks had a chance to watch that September 27th financial town hall, a lot of the groundwork was laid there. So I'll turn it over to Chris Burkhart, our Chief Operating Officer, to further the conversation.
Hi, and thank you very much for allowing me to be here today to spend some time with you to talk about both the vendor report and the facilities needs request. And okay, sorry, thank you so much. And so the vendor report has come out of a action item out of this committee, and so we have a couple of different things happening at the same time within this report. One is the request for the information, first of all. Second, it goes to the guardrail 4A and 4B that we'll be discussing at the future board meeting, as well as the need to draw down into the data within our procurement. As Chief Operating Officer, I oversee procurement, facilities, transportation, as well as student dining. And so a lot of these cross-reference into different areas that I oversee as well. As we look at the minority, women-owned, and local businesses on the report, a lot of that data goes back to 2016, and that is the date in which we started to really start to look at and ask vendors to self-admit if they fell into one of those categories. The report actually will also show everything from 2016 to current within who's broken down into what category. As we look at the data moving forward, we're actually looking at a couple of different things. One is we want to look at cross-categorical, so those minority and women-owned businesses or minority and local-owned businesses, as well as women and local-owned businesses. So we're going to start to cross-categorize some of these as well to figure out which bucket they also fit in to see what overlap we have. We do know that we want to increase these numbers as we're looking at both the number of individuals or groups that are on the solicitation list, as well as the approved vendor list. We see a disparagement there. We see a large group of numbers that don't necessarily correlate with each other. So we really need to dig down into that data and see, is it the fact that folks aren't self-admitting to which group they belong in, or are they, or do we have a different area? The next piece to that is actually, after we get the data and really analyze it, is going back and then asking for proof of business as well as we look at the data. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but happy to answer any questions you have about the report or the methodology.
So is that like a certification that it's women-owned?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The certifications.
Thanks. Thanks, Chris. This is great. Very helpful. I appreciate it. Do have a question though. I noticed where we have a date. It's where the creation. That's the report was run rather than when these people started. So do we have information? Is that on the second sheet as to which of these vendors began with the new administration?
Yes.
And on the second,
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, he provided the report, but I also just validated it. And so the creation date column is when the vendor was added into the Business Plus system. And then to further that, you can see the paid amounts by fiscal year. So the question I have is, it just because we added a vendor, did we actually execute business with them? And so if you follow along the columns, the total paid is dating all the way back to 2016, but then the remaining 3 columns are by fiscal year. So you can see fiscal 24 to date, fiscal 23, and fiscal 22. The NA indicates no spend, and then the dollar amounts are listed as appropriate.
And I think the ask was also, what are those, who are those vendors who have done business with us for quite some time, as well as the ones who have been added since May of 22. If you look at this list, the ones that are kind of highlighted in gray are
Okay,
the ones that are added since May 2nd of 2022. The ones that are not highlighted are ones that are
been for a
reoccurring.
while. Okay,
Correct.
great, thank you.
And I think that was the ask. So if I got that wrong, please correct me, but I thought that was the ask.
No, we wanted to be able to do that, especially from a standpoint of local vendors versus non-local vendors. Also, the amount of money we're spending on the same kind of thing now that perhaps we were spending or not spending previously. So this is helpful.
Yeah, and
Thank
so
you.
as I stated before, this data also is being drilled down into for guardrail number 4. So we're actually going in a much deeper dive into those to separate each one of those out as well. Sure.
Okay. Is there, I know that, and I don't have the guardrails readily in front of me. Unfortunately, I should know them by now, but I don't. Is there any plan to tie this into the KPIs along with, I'm very interested to see department that it coincides with and the KPI so that, let's say this particular vendor, I'll just go down the list, is same goal. Are they curriculum? Are they a direct impact to students? Are they kind of maybe professional development? What's the return on investment? I'm really interested in having ultimately one sheet that has all of this on here, maybe not printed, but electronically, but it also can kind of tell us, give us a great indicator of the return on the investment. We've spent X number of dollars with this particular vendor. It's touching our curriculum department, and which may touch kids directly, but it's for $1 million, we've gotten this much impact. Is there a plan to have that type of reporting? And again, I don't know what guardrail goal 4 is, but maybe that's that.
Shame on you.
I know.
I can read you guardrail 4 if you like.
First 3 and the 5th.
So it's ironic that you asked this question because the meeting that I came from right before this was a KPI meeting. So I am working with Jen and Cody specifically as we look at procurement and KPIs together. They are not two separate processes. They're overlapped. So actually, Jen, Cody, and I had a meeting yesterday around KPIs. Again, we had a follow-up meeting today to make sure that we are getting those accurate KPIs put in the system. And then we're going to start analyzing those as well as the second tier after we get the data. Start looking at not only do we have the KPIs, what is the spend, and how accurate do both of those correlate or not correlate.
Okay. So it sounds to me, this sounds great. And Jen knows, I'm sure, if you met with Jen, she knows exactly what I'm asking for because I ask for it all the time. The only thing I think that I'm missing is maybe department or some touch point of who the impact to that. Who is that impacting? So I don't know if that's you or her. She knows I'm going to ask for that because then it comes down to per pupil spend, for me. But
not passing them up, but ultimately that's not me. But okay.
Right. I got you. But thank you.
Yeah, happy.
Yeah, I think too, board members, question, it would be nice to have categories
Mhm.
because I don't know how to group these to see, are we overspending in one area and not in another? So if there was some kind of category as well added to these would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on the vendor listing?
So shall we transition to facilities?
Sure.
Another happy topic.
So I'm hoping that everyone was able to at least listen or watch the financial town hall where we spoke about the need for maintenance and facilities within our operations. So I don't want to reiterate all of those. We do know that, we blink an eye and we build a building, we blink an eye and next thing you know, that building is 10, 15, 20 years old. And we said, well, we just built that building, but there's a lot that goes into the upkeep. We are well past our life on a lot of our systems, a lot of even just regular maintenance or just visual maintenance, if you will. Things like carpet, for example, would typically in a commercial setting have about a 7-year life, and we have schools that we haven't replaced the carpet in 20 years. So we're well beyond the life of those. I don't think we've painted a building on the inside in quite some time as well. And that's evident that you can clean just so much, but there's something to be said, for having a bright, inviting atmosphere. A lot of our HVAC has been upgraded due to COVID, so that's a blessing. But we still have a lot of controls, a lot of boilers and chillers that need to be replaced as part of that. And we took a systematic approach and looked at every functional area of all of our buildings. We tried to make sure that every building got some level of touch point throughout throughout the 5 years for the plan. We also wanted to be very, very diligent in making sure that the ask was for what we need, not necessarily, pie in the sky, what we would like. It was really looking at, is our systems functional? If they are, do they need to be upgraded, or what is the life expectancy of those? So we really took a deep dive. It's a little overwhelming if you try to look at it all in one fell swoop, but looking at each chunk separately, I think it provides a good picture of where we currently are and where we need to go. Happy to answer any questions. Right now, I would say if there's something that keeps me awake at night, it's probably roofs. And so if you look at the roofing graph, we have a lot of roofs that need to be either repaired or replaced. Right now, we're looking at a repair of all of them versus replacement because we just can't afford to do the replacement. In a perfect world, if we had the funds, we would do a lot more replacement than repair. And when I say replacement, I'm saying taking the roof all the way off and all the way down to the infrastructure. And so as we look at those types of things, obviously, if something's wrong with the roof, then everything else below it starts to falter. So you have wet ceiling tiles, the ceiling tiles fall, creates an issue on the floor. Water running down the walls, obviously, buckles either plaster or drywall, creates an unsightly area as well. So, everything ties back to roofs in one way or another. And if we have a solid foundation, a solid roof, everything in between those, we can work on pretty easily.
One question that I had that commentator had when he asked you, what is it conditioned? What's it conditioned? What's controlled? Obviously I understand I love going in and remotely turning on heat, remotely turning on whatever, remotely turning on locks. But is there an ROI that we can associate that with this? Because those are not, cheap, right?
Mhm.
So, I'd welcome a little more insight on the cost benefit on that. I mean, I love the idea, but it's really kind of a nice to have, unless, it pencils. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't bring the figures here, but I'm happy to share them at the next meeting. But there is absolutely an ROI on that, and actually saved us a heck of a lot of money in a couple of different ways. So the first is, yes, it's really nice and easy to be able to turn on and off, HVAC when we need it, and I'll talk about that in a second. The more important piece to that is being able to look at the entire system in real time and see where there's errors or where there's faults. And so whether that's makeup air, whether that's a VAV not working properly, no matter what it is along the system, what would happen previously is we would have something break and we'd have to start at the beginning of the system and work our way through every single component. And these are really complex systems here. It could take us a day or 2 days just to isolate what the actual problem is. When those controls are isolated and we have the controls automated, we can actually look in real time right on the laptop as I'm sitting here right now and tell you exactly what the problem is, what motor's out, what the return error is, and all of those types of things. So not only is it good from a commissioning side where I can say, hey, you would like to utilize this room, so a half hour before we get here, we automatically set the controls. No one has to physically come in here, adjust the thermostat, or go to the area to make the adjustments. So, and we also know that we typically in the past have commissioned a lot of our spaces throughout the entire day. And we're really looking at right now a 6 to 6 window in commissioning our spaces. And then anything either before or after that is based on facility use. So if we have facility use, we'll obviously heat or air condition that space and I'll turn on the lights. But if not, that goes back to our standard settings so that we can make sure. So from that aspect, we're actually going to save money every year moving forward versus just a one-time savings. But I'm happy to share with you the whole commissioning side because it's fascinating and there's a lot of work that has gone into it over the past 3 years, plus we're finishing it up at the end of this year.
yeah, listen, that was a great response. Thank you so much. It was perfect.
I'm excited about it. So
I was going to ask if Dr. Moffat had any, obviously this is really good information for us. I've been talking about this for a year or so, that we as an audit committee, in order to make informed decisions about areas that we want to audit or areas that we can help the board, we need to educate ourselves on what's going on. And so this is great information for us to consume. Is there anything that the board is looking at for the audit committee to help opine on, give advice, etc.?
I don't know at this time, but wanted to make sure that you were aware of this. And obviously this is, as the treasurer's indicated, this is not anything we can afford out of a general fund. So the reality is that this would need somewhere in the near future, we would have to be going to the public for some ask, and not necessarily about operating, but indeed more of a permanent improvement or some of these other options. If the climate is not good now to be asking for this, and we'd have to earn our way to get to the ballot, because right now, even our use of our facilities is not at its max as it should be. And so that would be the first question by people asking, well, you can't even figure this out, right now about some buildings are at 70% usage and others are wherever. But so I think from the audit folks' standpoint, I think we have to be contemplating in some plan, probably within the next 5 years, this next 5-year plan, that we would be going back to the voters for a big ask. We know we have a renewal at least ask coming in 25 for preschool promise. But, I will tell you that a new ask is a big deal. We've now had 8 years in between our last 2 asks or 3 asks. So we're proud of that, holding off 8 years, and appreciate that. But this is going to be a big ask, and probably will need to reflect whatever kind of reorganization we might be able to get from our ad hoc committee that we've mentioned before, of reorganizing how we do business and where we do business and what have you. But we want this to be part of what you all are thinking about when you're looking at our health, is how we start to frame this and how we have to get ready to do this. Thanks.
It seems like pretty many years ago, maybe when Taft was governor, there was a lot of money that came from the state for facilities. Is that correct? Remember those days?
Yeah,
It was almost $1 billion, right, for
would have been the
CPS?
Facilities, it would have been the Facilities Commission.
Yeah.
And we did, that is what this is all about, why we were able to do what we were able to do. And the remarkable thing is when this got done and we had to go to the voters, and this even precedes me, I think we asked twice, and it finally passed the second time. And frankly, it was almost the promise of community learning centers that got that extra few percentage points to pass this. And it was a close vote, as I understand it. But it was $1.2 billion, 78% of which was local. And that also, it holds the record statewide, that not only were we one of the few districts that did the whole thing, and which was really hard and really good, and right-sized and what have you, and went through a big dip in decline in enrollment, and then plateaued, and then came back. Many years of swing space and what have you. But that's what you're talking about. Now there's not that kind of availability for funds. So we'd really, at least as I understand it now, we'd be going back to our local folks without necessarily any matching funds or any contractors brought in from Columbus or recommended, like Turner was, I think fortunately was forced upon us from Columbus. Yeah, you're right. It's not there now. If anything, it's going to private and parochial schools if they're going to be building anything with state money.
I just also want to add, everything that Eve said is unfortunately direly true. However, I, along with some other board members, are asking Chief Burkhart and others to look into green sustainability and solar ways. You know, there's like this, I don't know a lot about it, but I do know some about it, and that maybe some of our buildings could be upgraded to solar, and then we could sell that. I don't know the specifics, but, and then also look for grants, because the city is aware of monies regarding sustainability that perhaps we could partner and tap into. So we're trying to use due diligence and be well-rounded, but the realization is that we're still going to have a very daunting task. But I do think it's also credible to say that we're trying to encourage them to seek out and secure, not just seek out, but secure funding that is available from the government, to your point, regarding sustainability and green use technology, because some of our buildings do qualify for that. So that is also my expectation of Chief Burkhart. I think he's heard that, and I've tried to connect him with the city that is they have access to grants, and so we can apply for that. So I think it's kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time. There's a lot to do. This is dire. Even if we got a lot done, we still have deficits. But we are trying to show the voters that we are being responsible and at least trying to be fiscally responsible.
I just want to know, how often are the facility assessments done within the system?
So I don't know that answer. I've been with the districts for a little over a year now. Before, when I asked some of the team members, it had been quite some time before a complete assessment has been done to this level across all of our systems in the district. So we have had some folks come out and do a roofing assessment or boiler and chiller assessment or assessment maybe on outside doors, but nothing to this level. I would ask the board members if they know, but in the recent history, we haven't had anything this comprehensive in some time.
Well, I can't recall anything of this level in the last, I would say, 5 years. Prior to that, some of that is too early to do it, if you talk in terms of how new the buildings are. But I think this is a great start. And also, I hate to say it, this is also the kind of stuff that's not going to attract a lot of voters. I mean, even in conservative Cincinnati, doing things that are maintaining or things that are improving existing versus we're going to build a new high school over where Einold is. That appears to have some traction when you go to the voters. This has almost no attraction. So you're going to have to not only be worthy of it and prove it and whatever, but you're also going to have to be offering some other package that makes sense to people. Like, okay, this will reduce class size. This will somehow make not only our buildings green, but they'll be healthier. So it has to be a big package. But this is such a good fundamental beginning. I think is great.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one kind of full circle comment. So this year's plan, we include a risk matrix that's evaluating the risks throughout the district. And so when we had our annual planning conversation this summer, Chris is laughing because it really is full circle. I said, what keeps you up at night? And this was the answer. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to start to track from an audit committee perspective through conversation, but also through the work that internal audit is doing in developing and documenting things such as this, but well beyond, and trying to get our arms around what all is out there and where do we have these opportunities now to escalate and share with the audit committee to think strategically. So I just want to kind of make a note that this comes back to that approval of our fiscal 24 plan, and that project that you all supported for us to do this year is starting to think in this way. So I really appreciate your time in coming to speak with us in the committee for covering this topic today.
Great. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the Council of Great City Schools Human Resources Review.
I just wanted to say thank you. Great job. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Sorry for shotgunning you in there earlier. Okay. In our packet is 3 different items. The first is 60-some page review of the Office of Human Resources and Talent. Second is a presentation that the Council of Great City Schools did to the board, I believe in August. Yep, August 7th. And then the third item is a report given by Chief Riley to the board just a week or so ago, and the administration's response to this review. And I'll start by saying I want to be very intentional with the word review over audit, because we're the audit committee, but this is not an audit. The content that was derived from this review didn't go through a formed audit process. It was the Council of Great City Schools reviewing documents, reviewing information, interviewing members of the administration. So let's just get that out there before we dive into anything, so everyone understands the difference between those two things. So we typically have folks come in, like Chief Burkhart, come in and report to us, but we felt like that may not be necessary again, because they reported to the board, and then the administration reported to the board, and so we asked everyone in the room to review both of those recordings. They were about 45 minutes or an hour each. And so we didn't feel like it would be worth our time to rehear the same report. So, so today we have this information, and I want to open it up to the group to just discuss anything, any questions that we have. We have been down this path with HR and with payroll before. And so with that, I will open it up to anyone that has any comments or questions, and we can discuss as long or as short as we need to discuss. So, Lauren, did I miss anything there?
Spot on. And I will say just briefly that Jennifer Wagner, Treasurer CFO, is attending a conference with the Council of Great City Schools, presenting and traveling now. So she does apologize she's not here, but did ask me to share that she does have some additional thoughts and perspective on this report that's somewhat different. I do think, Dan, you captured a lot of Jen's thoughts around you know, this being a somewhat narrow review. So I'm sure CFO Treasurer Wagner would be happy to share her thoughts when she comes back to us. And Ms. Bolton, if you have any additional thoughts you think she may want represented today, but I know she had some differing opinions as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I do want the audit committee to, and I really want the board to have a better understanding of some of the perspectives that Jen has. And as a follow-up to this, it remains, and I know we discussed this at least once, maybe twice before. I'm not even talking about benefits. I'm talking about HR and what have you, and the reporting and some of the stuff that our internal auditors come up with regarding data and documents and whatever. Even to this point, there's still been additions to the HR department in personnel. And I know that we've talked about, do you outsource? What do you do? And part of this is at least my perspective is part of this is a personnel issue. And we certainly don't want to proceed without the right data, which is what our internal auditor has said. But again, we continue to be adding to the HR department. And indeed, that's one of the things that's suggested in the Great City Schools approach. So it's something we're watching as we are faced with these big cuts that we have been talking about and absorbing elsewhere or whatever. So that's I think when the treasurer is able to talk a little bit with you about it, that'll be part of the spin. We'll be continuing to grow a department that has issues. That's as succinctly as I can say that.
Any other comments or thoughts?
Does the approval of those positions go through the board?
Oh, absolutely. It takes 4.
Got it.
Yeah, it takes 2 votes.
But the board may be in a different place, because even when that was initially presented just very recently, the board also was not really confronted with what we're really talking about regarding the size of the changes that we're going to have to make. So the board is probably evolving into another kind of mindset eventually over all of this. So it might be part of that list. But indeed, the superintendent continues to add positions in the midst of this. So feels they're needed, and the board has to say yes or no, but well, we might all be in a different place very soon.
So I have a question for Lauren. Based on the response, do you feel like the response reflects good progress and an upward trajectory of improvement?
No, that's a great question, and Dan and I did have a brief call before today's conversation to kind of think through what we have observed thus far. Unfortunately, I was not a part of this process aside from being one of the people who were interviewed, and they did cite some internal audit information throughout the report. So I would be inappropriate for me to state the extent to which management has acted without having been very involved. But what I will say is my belief and understanding, as I've shared with board members after Finance Committee recently, is that in order for eventually internal audit to be involved, or for us to make progress in the types of tangible steps I would expect to see, would be things that would include proper documentation of processes. As rudimentary as that seems, it's such a simple thing we don't currently have in place, to my understanding. So there you can deduce that we probably do not have proper controls. It would be difficult to opine on the efficiency of a process. And then also, do we have people with clearly outlined tasks to say, yes, in fact, that position is needed? And so those are the types of things that I think our team would look for from a process, a staffing, and then further a data perspective. Do we have information that supports and informs those decisions, and that management is regularly reviewing and monitoring? So without knowing beyond what was presented publicly, those were the types of things I would look for. And based on what I saw publicly presented, I don't think those things were touched on as much as maybe a little bit of a retroactive perspective as to what has been done so far. It was a little bit of a history of what's happened over the last year or two from my perspective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Quick question. Obviously, it's pretty intuitive, but can somebody give me a background of the Council of Greater City Schools? I mean, I see who's on the team, but what do they do? What is it? I don't know. I've only been here for a year and a half. I should know this, right? But I have zero idea who this consultant is and what they're providing.
They 15 years or so ago, the board was very much divided in that part of the board wanted to follow in the footsteps, if you will, or get the guidance, I should say, of Great City Schools, Council on Great City Schools. And the other half of the board wanted to kind of stay with the National School Board Association. They're kind of operating in that way. However, the Council on Great City Schools is someone that we've contracted with for at least 15, 16 years. And the Council on Great City Schools, it's the urban flavor, but it isn't the offshoot of the National Association's of school boards that has something called CUBE. So there's a division of the National Association of School Boards, and that is urban. We don't pay, unfortunately, very much attention to them, and there's a discussion on the board about doing that. But it has its membership is listed, and major cities participate in this and provide guidance. One of the better things that they do is they do a nice comparative analysis on certain topics. So the administrators would go there and say, we'd like to know about transportation, let's say, how is it working in other places? That's one of their great efforts. So recently they've been helping the board with governance, and there's some discussion about that, but it's a reputable group of people. They've changed their leadership in the last 2 years. So it's a relatively new leadership team with which we're dealing. They are under contract with us for about $100,000 a year for that advice and for their services. And as was NSBA, but NSBA for all intents and purposes doesn't exist any longer, only OSBA does. So it's an advisory group and a comparative analysis group, especially useful for urban districts. Some of the board members really like them, and some of the board members are not real pleased with them. But
Thank you. That was helpful.
thanks.
In times that we've seen information from the Council of Great City Schools here under an audit purview is the benchmarking report data that we've shared in the past that has been done and organized by the Council of Great City Schools, as well as a internal audit in public school districts white paper that I think came out around the time I started, so around 2016. So those are times you've seen tidbits in this setting from them.
Okay, I guess to just kind of button things up, I think just to get it back out on the record, we continue to look at benefits, the B word. I know you joked about that in one of the meetings in the last week. We've audited payroll in the past. We've audited benefits. It's on our radar. This falls slightly in the purview of all of that, but slightly outside of it because some of it is more contextual, not really truly auditable items. So from my perspective, I think we're focusing on those areas appropriately. They are where we have a lot of spend. So there's financial risk, there's other risks. So I think it falls well within the risk assessment that we've been doing as a group and Lauren's team has been doing. So if there's no other questions, we can go ahead and move on to brief audit committee update. So we do have 2 members who will be coming up on the end of their term at the end of this calendar year. That is Clarice and Carol. And we don't have to do anything formal right now, but we did receive email from both of you saying you would like to re-up your term. So assuming that hasn't changed since since you emailed us.
Oh, I don't know.
So our formal process is that we'll do a formal vote in our December meeting. But for now, we talk about this now so that we know if we need to go out and recruit additional members. So our requirement is to have not less than 8, but no more than 10 community members, and that will keep us at 8 community members. So we have the option to go out and recruit, and if we find the right candidates, we can interview and bring them in, or we can say we're not going to do that this year at all. We have the latitude to do either of those. So I'll open it up to the floor to discuss and see if where we stand.
So question, how many are up for re-election next year? I'm thinking maybe we should go recruit just so we have, I'm sorry.
We did.
Emma's looking that answer up right now. I should know, but
Sorry.
just give me 1 second.
Okay. Based on that, if we have a good amount coming up, then maybe we should go and recruit and see if we can find. No pressure to actually get someone, but maybe wouldn't hurt.
Also, I think that maybe if we have some interest, I think maybe Jim mentioned some interest, it might not be a bad idea to bring at least one person on, given the way people move and leave and lose interest. I don't think it'd necessarily be a bad idea because, we've lost at least one. We lost 2 this year. That could happen again.
I think it's always good to have diversity of experience, diversity of opinion. We've only had 1 new member in the last couple of years. That's Paul, and you've been on for almost 2 years now. And so the newest person before then, it's been so long I couldn't even tell you. It's probably Liz in her second term. Mm-hmm. So I agree with David. I think if the right candidate were there that has interest, I think the interest component is interesting to me because if you have a passion for the district, then we want you here. I think that's I think everyone could agree with that.
So to answer your question for the following year, it's David Foote, Tim Heldman, and Paul. The 3 of you would be up for another 3-year term at the end of, so 12/31/2024 would be your last day of your current term, and we'll be asking you for another 3 years then. So start thinking now.
Is there any opposition to opening up for a position and posting it and seeing what we get? Yeah.
So if we'd like to move forward with that, I think, because it's been a little bit since we went through this, we work with the communications team, get a public notice posted on social media, all of the different routes on our webpage. a call for those who are interested, hopefully have a diverse and suitable background for these topics. And then we will follow the dates that are outlined under December there. So we would open the window for applications until December 1st. So this will be something like I would do tomorrow, get this rolling as soon as possible, get that window open as soon as possible, because December 1st will be here before we know it. Closing then on the 1st, allowing from December 2nd to the 12th, again, not a huge window, but 10 days there to interview, and then coming to the December 13th meeting with a proposed individual or individuals who then the whole committee could discuss. And I think one point that we would have to decide on today that would be helpful are those who may be interested in interviewing those folks or reviewing applications. Typically the role I have played is just gathering the applications. If they have simple questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. But I certainly like to defer to this group to select your peers, certainly as I am a direct report to this group, of course. So I think historically it has been the audit committee chair, perhaps the vice chair, but we've always opened it up to the group, I think, for anyone else who may be interested in being a part of the selection process. So are there any other folks who would like to be a part of that as I pass on those applications? Okay, great. Oh, wonderful.
I mean, I think David and I, we've done some interviews in the past.
Yes. So we have Clarice, Jim, Dan, and Liz as the interview selection application review committee, if you will. We'll find a shorter title, but.
We don't all four have to interview if people want to review
Yeah, divide and
applications.
conquer, whatever the case. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right.
we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
4-on-1 interview is really intense for Okay. And then the other component of the December meeting will be the election for the chair and vice chair positions. So if you're interested in either of those are 1-year terms. So feel free to discuss with Lauren, and there will, I can't really remember what the process was with nomination at the meeting, but we'll figure that out as we get closer to that. Okay, moving on, Lauren and her team would like to talk about the audit committee dashboard.
Wonderful, thank you. So Rob, if you would pull up the dashboard in the Smart Sheet, wonderful. So we are really excited to share this with you all today. I think we've talked about this being a goal of ours to have a dashboard and a new take on the way we present information to this committee. So the purpose of this dashboard is to replace the audit status report that we have provided to you every meeting for the past who knows how many years. And quite frankly, that report was fine, but it really wasn't that informative or interactive in comparison to this new tool. So that will replace with the purpose of keeping you informed of audit committee tasks, responsibilities, and resources, but most importantly, the status of internal audit work as well as external audit projects. So you'll see, I'll talk you through the first 3 sections, and then each of my team members will take a turn explaining further sections. So at the top of this document, you don't have access yet, but starting tomorrow you will. We'll share it with you. We wanted to talk you through today before just tossing it to you. So this top section are the items for review in advance of audit committee meetings. The feedback we've received is that sometimes those audit Google folders have a lot of documents, and what do we really need to look at before the meeting? So this will be the summary. This is reflective of the email that I sent to you all in advance of this meeting, but we will provide a description of what you should review and links to those documents there as well. And so the purpose of this discussion today and the takeaway that we hope to accomplish is through reviewing this with you today and sending you the link, we kindly ask that you spend a few minutes reviewing the dashboard, seeing what you think, and then completing the feedback form. And Rob, if you wouldn't mind selecting the audit committee review form link there, it will take you to something that looks like this. And if you could enter your name, provide a response. The first section is a 1 through 5 scale, hopefully rather straightforward. And the second part are open-ended comments What do you like? What do you not like so much? How easy is it to use? And ultimately, do you feel more informed through this tool? So we ask that you complete that feedback form for us by Thursday, November 21st, to allow us to make the changes in advance of our next meeting on December 13th. So really briefly, the two sections below here are audit committee useful links. I won't talk through those, but as you play and kind of click through, please let us know if there's other things that you are commonly looking for or trying to reach. In this, we can update that to reflect whatever is most appropriate. And then the upcoming dates is a quick summary. We'll update that to include every meeting between each audit committee. So from now until December 13th, here are some notable meetings you may want to watch. And then I'm also sending you all calendar invites and updating the Blue Jeans link information once that's released. So just go to your calendar invites or of course any board site to access the meeting link. So this next section, the external audit summary, this replaces that last page of the audit status report, and it will report to you the audits that are, audits or reviews I should say, because in many cases they are reviews for our grants department, any that are either in progress or that have been completed since the last audit committee meeting. And those that have been completed will include a link to the document if there is a report or resulting information. So the next section here, this is a summary of the fiscal 2024 internal audit plan. So what this document, or pardon me, this chart represents is the complete versus in progress or open task of the audit plan. The caveat to all of this is, Emma will explain in further detail, is it's driven by all of the tasks that exist in all of our project worksheets. So right now, you see that 12% are complete while 88% are open. That will continue to evolve as each of those project sheets add more tasks as we get further into things. But ideally, this gives the audit committee some insight into our progression through the plan. And over time, we expect that progression of complete tasks to move. And what we call complete are things that have been prepared, fully reviewed, signed off on, and you're really ready for reporting. So that's kind of our scale for comparison. So I'll turn it over to Emma to talk through more detail behind the internal audit plan projects.
So our audit committee dashboard is designed to provide a clear understanding of the overall progress and then each individual phase of each of our projects. The dashboard is comprised of various key components such as charts, graphs, and different visual representations. So we kind of tried to throw different things in there to keep it a little more exciting, even though it's just a bunch of data. We're hoping it's making a convenient way to access all of our project information kind of just in one place. The internal audit team has been working really hard to develop an electronic audit management system, and so we've decided to go with Smartsheet. It was something that we've kind of used in the past, and it was really easy to transition all of the project plans that we have completed last year and had started this year into this type of dashboard. So each project within our internal audit plan lists out all of our required tasks, which sometimes change depending on when we go into an area, and it might be totally different than what we had thought. You know, a lot of the areas that we do go into, we've never audited before, so those tasks change depending on what it all entails. We assign our responsibilities and the different due dates so we can keep track of our own time and kind of establish who's going to be preparing and who's going to be reviewing and when those due dates are. So hopefully we're able to then see if somebody has a lot on their plate for 1 month versus another month, and we're able to move those items around. We're able to track the hours spent on each task. So next year when we come up with our different audit plans, we're kind of able to estimate what it's going to take to complete an area. I think it'll be really helpful, especially when we're bringing on an intern and going through those different tasks with them. We're also able to document reviewer sign-offs, which will help when the IIA come in and kind of, you know, overview our Red Book compliance as an internal audit department. So the dashboard presents a comprehensive view of the multiple project plans that we have. We have 7 this year. So each project has been subdivided to allow for an individual assessment of its real-time status. It updates every 10 minutes. So if it flashes, that's what it's doing. And you can see the planning, fieldwork, and the completion and reporting phase of each of our projects. And the big difference here is the semicircular metric provides an overview that displays the total project status as a percentage. So it's giving you that total overview, which feeds into that larger half circle above. And then the bar graphs further dissect the phases of the project to offer a real-time understanding of current timelines. So you'll most likely see those different numbers change because those are our tasks that we have put in those areas as of now. They're going to be, depending on the timelines of how we look at these, some tasks are on the back end because we're not in that phase of the project yet. And if you go down, I think, to the bottom one, where it says, sorry, it's a big graph. Yeah, status of past recommendations. We've been really, or Isaac's been really working on this area. So our project plan, you can see, is much more completed than some of the other areas. The numbers within each of these bar graphs represent the actual task count within each phase of our project. So in practice, this means that the larger projects may naturally have a higher number of tasks allocated to each of those phases. It's essential to note that these numbers don't inherently convey the duration of these tasks. So again, a lot of the times we go into these new areas, we have an idea or a general idea of what should be audited or how we can audit it, and then we have these conversations and it ends up it's just not true. So we have to go in and customize a lot of the controls or what the process is versus maybe what the process should be if we were going in and auditing a more established area. So I think that's going to be nice, especially over time when we kind of take these screenshots to see how much has changed. And hopefully at the end of all of it, it's all going to be green and closed up by the end of the year. So this high-level perspective is invaluable for evaluating an overall project position. By representing project phases instead of task durations or specific due dates, we maintain a high-level overview of our projects without getting lost in the details, which I know we kind of do sometimes here. So this approach simplifies decision-making and then ensures that everyone involved understands our progress. And in summary, our dashboard offers, hopefully, a unique perspective to our projects. And it allows us to communicate effectively to you guys. And we're able to kind of have those candid conversations. If there are constraints on a project, why is there a constraint? We're able to kind of deep dive in and drill down into that data. And then you're able to see once we close out an area, now we can move on to another one. Or I think security last year kind of took a lot more than what we thought. So we're able to have those conversations up front because we're going to be able to see it real time rather than like dig through all of the project plans that we have individually mapped out. Another big area that we've added to it is the status of past internal audit recommendations. So Isaac will go into that in a second, but we're also kind of taking this idea for an audit committee dashboard and we're making an internal audit dashboard. So project-wise, we're able to see high level where we are as staff, and I think that'll help the intern tremendously when he or she comes on, and hopefully we're able to communicate a little more effectively with this. I will pass it along and then we can answer any questions.
Great. So this section relates to the status of past internal audit recommendations. And so the audit committee requested that we more continuously update you all on the status of past recommendations that we issue from our past audits. And so historically, internal audit would meet with various members of management throughout the district who had outstanding recommendations, and we would update the audit committee based on their response to that update. And so we basically did it just once a year. And so as time has gone on, the number of recommendations has continued to build up, and it has become quite a big undertaking to complete that every summer. I think as an audit team, we kind of have to think back to what we did, and there's just a lot of work to kind of get through that. And so there's also lots of back and forth with communication and meetings and whatnot during that one time a year update. And so this new methodology is going to be every audit committee meeting, and it'll be communicated through this dashboard below. But this will essentially, I guess, make things a lot more efficient for us, so we don't have to reach out and facilitate meetings with management, and this will just automatically be something that they perform after we issue any recommendations. So jumping into the new methodology, the big question that we kind of asked ourselves is, what do we want to capture from management, and what do we want to communicate to you all that we captured from management while making it efficient and most useful? And so internal audit has built out a tool for every area that has outstanding recommendations. Once we kind of built out the methodology, we met with all departments or areas and kind of kicked off this new methodology. We kind of explained all of our expectations and whatnot, and then subsequently we followed up with a kind of feedback meeting with them to kind of get any insider feedback on the new tool. And so moving forward, for each audit committee meeting, the various members of management will have to provide various updates around the status of the recommendation, a written explanation as to progress that's been made since the last update, an estimated implementation date, notable impacts or improvements, and then so on and so forth. So we have a lot more detail behind each response from them, but it would be really overwhelming if we gave you all of that information. So we kind of kept it high level here for you all, but we can certainly kind of go into detail where needed. And so within each of the sheets, we also provided various links and various tools for them to use as they kind of go through it, an instructions guide and various other things. So all of those responses from them will feed up into this, these various visuals. And with all of this kind of being initiated and created and kind of kicked off, it's our hope as an internal audit department that we can kind of just jump in and review their responses and review their documentation they provided, and check it for reasonableness and usefulness, to kind of, I guess, minimize the work that we have to do on our end to get everything we need. And so if we go up one graph, please. So this first graph here that we decided to utilize, this displays incomplete recommendations by fiscal year. And so this is based on when the report was issued. And so as you can see, we have a few recommendations that go back to as far as 2018, majority being recommended in 2023. And so I figured this would be great to just kind of monitor as we move along, where are things at, maybe prioritize various things that are a bit older. That was the first one we created based on their responses. And then below these, each of the projects with outstanding recommendations kind of breaks out by each area, and it gives a high-level overview of what has not started, what is in progress, what is complete. And then also, if you hover over each of those percentages, it'll give you the number of each of those that are within that category. And then finally, so that's all of the outstanding ones. And then finally at the bottom, this is more of like a detailed table around all of the areas that we've covered since, I believe, Lauren, since you started, all the recommendations that have been issued, various details around departments that are related to this area, and we didn't include the visuals above for areas that have already implemented everything because we created it to track what hasn't been completed, and so we wanted to kind of capture that down here, and those are highlighted in green. So as you can see, since 2017, there's been 189 completed, and so on and so forth. And you can kind of look through this and see, but we were also kind of thinking as a area kind of fully implements everything, might be a good time to kind of bring them back in and kind of explain what their takeaways have been, kind of give a little bit more detail as to what improvements have been made, what savings has been discovered and whatnot, and with them having that all outlined in our sheet, they'll be able to kind of go back and look and see what has been tracked. I think that's everything I had for the recommendations piece.
So we'd love to open up for questions and comments, and of course, if you do have more detailed feedback, we'd love if you could use the form so we don't miss out on capturing any of that as well.
I have a couple questions. First of all, just for knowledge, what software tool are you using for the dashboard?
So this is called Smartsheet, and it's a really adaptable tool that we use for dashboarding, but as well as our project, essentially our work programs. So Emma and team and Emma and Isaac have done a great job designing this somewhat general tool to serve the purpose of an audit software tool, so that we could have gone out and bought one, but instead the team built one.
Focusing on the follow-up, you talk about management providing feedback on a number of things like the status, and Isaac, you listed like 4 different things. Is that stuff they're putting in, or are they filling out an email and sending it to you, or so they're actually putting it into the software? Okay.
Yeah, so each area that has outstanding recommendations has their own tool, and so then they'll be able to go into that sheet and make all of the inputs in there, and you can even customize it to be like a drop down, a yes or a no, a percentage. And so we kind of already built that to where they just go in and go down the line for each of these, and each of them kind of explains what exactly we're looking for.
That's great.
Yeah.
But I did have one. Is it automatically live then? I mean, if I say I'm a manager and I say, yeah, we did that, and I click the button or drop down box or whatever, it all feeds up, and now it's out there. Or do you guys like look at that? Or
Yeah, so the way that I built this piece specifically, I created a different input for each audit committee meeting. So once we present to the audit committee, I'll lock that response, and then it'll kind of open up a new blank one that'll be for the next audit committee meeting. And another really great tool with this, and Emma could probably go on a long time about it, is you can set up a lot of workflows and automation that I already kind of does a lot of this as a date is reached, or if this is clicked, it does this. And so kind of built it to where it'll hopefully be the least amount of work for us to kind of maintain this as possible moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll add from a management side, I think the feedback that was received, because as Isaac said, we had the initial introductory, here's the how-to and our expectations, gave them a week and a half, 2 weeks, and said, let's get back together, what do you think? And I think from a management perspective, they thought this was a lot easier as well, because they get this automated email at the time frame of their choosing, 2 weeks out, 48 hours before the due date, those types of things. and they don't get an email for everything under AP. It goes to the person they've chosen as responsible. So, you know, one person may have just a couple. And so I think Isaac did a really wonderful job leading this project to ensure it's efficient for our team, but also for management, especially as we've seen turnovers in our leadership. This is a great way for those turnovers for this to stay current rather than the once a year and you have to do this big lift to re-educate people. So I think, as Isaac mentioned, but I do want to reiterate, this was a big front and investment to build, but hopefully something that serves us for many years.
A couple things. I love it already. I think it's a much easier way to visually understand where things stand. So kudos to the progress that has been made already. I think it's good that it helps keep things on top of mind. Like, I'm already intrigued. Like, what audits were from 2017? I mean, where are those people? So I think it helps keep things top of mind. And then I was writing down some notes on like immediate reactions that I'll share with you later because some of them are small. But the big one was, is there a way to quantify all of the recommendations that the audit committee has ever done so that we can say, hey, look, the audit committee and the internal audit team is providing a lot of value, and there's a lot of recommendations that are coming out of this. And yes, many of them are unresolved, and we have work to do there. Management has work to do there. But 189, and you said this goes back to 17. That's a lot of work. And so I think we've been talking about how do we justify our existence and where is the value we provide, and it's very apparent on this. So great job.
Thank you. And I will always remember Jim being the one who says, well, let's find a way to measure the great impact. And I think you've said that specifically a few times. And so while the table at the bottom is a great way to see how many recommendations have been issued just from a volume standpoint and how many have been implemented, one thing that Isaac's done a great job of in those fields that we're requesting of folks with open recommendations is how are you currently planning, or how are you planning, I should say, to track the impact and the value of implementing it. So what we don't want to do is have them implement and then we come back later and say, hey, what was the change? And realistically, you need to think about that beforehand so you can establish your baseline. And so we're having those types of conversations with the folks that are still in progress to start documenting, and whether it's qualitative or quantitative, we hope that eventually once we get more tidbits, we can further expand and highlight that as well.
I was also, kudos, great job, fan of dashboards. And I think the first thing that caught my attention, again with the 2018 not completed, is P-card, which I remember we had a lot of gaps there. And so I see a lot of red incompleted projects. And so how do we focus on those areas and even go back and audit maybe some of those areas to kind of further highlight again that some of the things that we saw before are still occurring, and it's still occurring because you haven't implemented our suggested process changes. Like, how do we kind of nudge? Because the other thing that I wondered, it's some of these suggestions, do they go on an evaluation? Is it a part of that department's evaluation? Because if you get it there, it holds credence. Until you tell me that you're going to evaluate me on it, it's just a nice fancy dashboard. So how do we get that meat behind all of this wonderful data that you have at our disposal so that we can target?
So I agree. I love the dashboard. I'm a dashboard fan as well. And to her point, so I know at the beginning you showed, oh, you don't have to go back. At the beginning you showed like what's important for us to review at every meeting. And you mentioned the Google Docs. Would you continue to still have them as, if we have to go back to, like if we decide, hey, we need to go back and look at those older audits, will you have the document linked from the older audits to the dashboard so that when we are preparing for the meeting, we have that information that we can do that side-by-side comparison, or does that go away?
So yes and no. So in terms of the Google folder itself, everything there will remain the same. So you'll always be able to go back to every meeting and access all of the documents that were shared. But in terms of archiving, so to speak, the dashboard, that's something we've been thinking through. So the most simplistic way to do that, we were thinking, is to print a PDF. So at least it is that snapshot of the moment. We're still exploring, does Smartsheet have a functionality where we save this is the as of, and it locks in. So when we make changes to our project sheets, this one doesn't change also. So we're exploring that functionality, but at a minimum, we want to at least memorialize it as a PDF so we can start to see changes over time, but also what was shared with you all at that time as well.
Okay. And then, I'm always a fan of making sure you all have the resources that you need to do the work. And so I think this is also a great tool that will support that and show the need.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I wanted to respond to Carol's point on the evaluation. I think because we only have updated annually, and then you come back and let us know that, hey, this hasn't been updated, and or these recommendations haven't been addressed. This allows us to keep it top of mind, and then we can tell Ms. Bolton and Ms. Moffitt, Dr. Moffitt, that this is important, and as a board, we're telling you that this is important, and then they can push on administration. And I think next meeting we're going to be talking about this 2018 one.
We already know.
So
The agenda.
we don't have to dust off the old Google files to
Right.
figure out what still hasn't been addressed.
Question about that process piece in all of this, because I remember, was it 2 meetings ago or last meeting where it's been a number of different times talked about, here's the number of recommendations that we've had, this is how many have been, and this is how many. I honestly don't know the process. It's confusing for me to know that we have the internal audit, whatever the title is that we use, and reporting to y'all and reporting to us, properly so. It doesn't report to the treasurer, doesn't report to the superintendent, properly so. But when we don't have recommendations adhered to or implemented, I know we'd be happy. Does that fall to us to have you tell this committee and then have the committee tell the board, these are things that are not happening, so that the board can then say to the superintendent, or I guess the superintendent, these are things that aren't happening, and by golly, this is, so maybe just if we know I think if we have that process in place, I think we could do that, where you would be informing your audit committee. I mean, there's other things that you talk to us directly about, but stuff like this, I think it goes to the audit committee and then comes to us. But then we would then, on your recommendation as the committee, we would then send it and say to the superintendent, fix this.
That was going to be my point. Lauren, I know I get on her nerves because I think that part of her responsibility is to inform the board in a more objective manner on where processes are efficient and inefficient, and where we need to procedurally make some recommendations with a gentle nudge to the administration, both the superintendent and the treasurer. And I think that this is great because it will enable all different types of learners, the visual, the written, to be able to understand that. And I'm speaking specifically of my colleagues who already don't understand finance, I don't think. And they also may not fully understand to a level, to the appropriate level of where we are as a district, efficient and inefficient. So I do think, and I asked board member Bolton before, like, how do I get Lauren to do an audit of something? Because there are times when recommendations are made and I defer to Lauren, like, Lauren, have you done an audit on that? And she's like, well, she's trying to be nice. And You know, but I don't think that the process is clear for the board. I also don't know if it's a policy that we need to establish or reestablish in the policy committee. But I think that there's so much work that has been done already, pre this administration and now post, that it already justifies you. This is great as far as I'm concerned. But it also, in this time where we're talking about budget, some of the things that have not been done and recommendations that may be being made are being made not having implemented things that we suggested, and that would make our processes more efficient. So I think this is the perfect time for, as we talk about budget, as we talk about money, as we talk about ad hoc with boundaries, as we talk about facilities, to really look into explaining to the community and the board, we have 3 distinct reports for a reason, and this is how this is going to go to us to help us make decisions to be more efficient. I mean, I think we're talking about things in a silo. We're talking about vendors, and then we're talking about budget, then we're talking about facilities, and we have those lengthy conversations, and they don't really ever tie into, in totality, how the district is run and how we can be more efficient. So I think this is great. I've told you that, Lauren, before, but I also think there's so much more work that could be done by you to help us be more efficient. And I don't know if that has to come through the committee, but I would love to see the committee be more, the committee hold the board more accountable to what Lauren sees and has already recommended. And with teeth, I think this committee gives Lauren's work teeth, and it gives it justification. And it is designed, I think, rather not being used efficiently, but it's designed to help us be more accountable to the other 2. So I would love to see that. I'm happy to help that in this time period right now. I think this is, we need everybody on the ground, because we're talking about money, and we're talking about adding, we're talking about levies, we're talking about bonds. I would love to be able to say to the community that this team has helped with the auditor, the internal auditor, look at where we can be more efficient, and those recommendations come with that backing.
Oh, I would just add, I agree, and that's why I think we need a process. There are things that Lauren and her team might do because we, as a board, or a board member actually too, can specifically make reference to, that does not necessarily include the audit, and those usually are kind of questionable and very narrow, difficult, kind of confidential things along the way. But I do think that we want to make sure that the audit committee remains completely independent of the board. So we would want the audit committee to tell us what needs to be done, rather than us telling the audit committee or even the internal auditor. So I think the independence is crucial, and we are more than, fortunately have a compatriot regarding finance, and I think also Member Craig. We have 3 people very, very interested in the whole finance piece, so which is great. But maintain your independence, and when she's doing all this stuff that they've all figured out, those are big chunks of things, and those are things that you assign and oversee, and then report to us when she reports to you. I think this would be great. And I think we do need to look at the policy. And I know we have to see if there's any kind of administrative guidelines, because we've now gone through, probably, you've had 4 administrations while you've been here, I think. Yeah. 4 administrations. And we haven't served you and this committee well enough. I don't know that we've all been in the right position to do so, but I think we're in a powerful, strengthened position right now to do that. And there should be no reason up there that there's any recommendation that is not adhered to. And if there is, there needs to be, to your point, a penalty to that, so that people just don't think we're doing this for, a magazine or something. No, this is it, because we boast about you all and all the time, and we're very fortunate to have you and that team over there. But I think your point is well taken. About let's look at a little bit of the policy and see not the charter. I ain't doing that anymore. unless you really want to, bring in candy and cakes and stuff and make me. But yes, I think that's great. That's been super. That's fabulous.
I think one point that's in my brain about some of these older recommendations that haven't been adhered to, I do think that our committee could add value in reviewing those, because there could be a good reason that one of them didn't get done because it's stale or something.
Excellent.
So it's not, I think we got to be cautious to be sure that whatever penalty might come is really real. And we don't just knee-jerk the thing.
Yeah, that's why I said, let's go back and maybe audit it again, see if it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't go in with the just expectation that it isn't, but likelihood, if they haven't made adjustments, those processes are still problematic.
Yeah, so one of the audits or the audits that we will be doing are the continuous auditing projects. So that kind of runs into some of these historical internal audit recommendations. One being overtime, another will end up being security. And another thing that we are really trying to be better at this year, especially with our recommendations, is telling management what the risk is and educating them on what the risk is and so why it matters. I think, we go in audit and we're like, here are all these problems, but the risk is this, and as a district, we need to go more together when it comes to caring about risk. So if you're not doing something on the payroll side, it's going to affect this, that, and the other. So I think tracking and how you created the tracker to implement like risks and why Chris is the way it is, would be really helpful for management going forward too. So they have a better understanding of how to close it out.
Lauren, since we have our planning meeting before this meeting, why don't we go ahead and just note that we're going to put that on the agenda to have this group look at all of the past recommendations? Because what we can't do is we can't go to the board and say, all 78 of these are really important, and you need to hold these 70 people accountable. And so maybe an agenda item for next meeting is us having an open discussion about all these items and try to power rank them, importance, risk, and elevate. And I don't know that I want to draw a line in the sand on how many, but elevate certain ones to the board and say these are critical and they need to be prioritized.
No, Anna stole my thunder. Basically, I would love to see a risk level. I'm sure there's 7. They probably could all be low, or they all could be high. I don't know. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but great point, excellent point, and excellent job on this as well.
Thank you. Thank you for all the feedback. And I'm so sorry, Jim.
Do you back this thing up? Your IT department's helping you with this. All right, well, be sure it's backed up.
Yeah, no, I love it, and it's also the bane of my existence, so.
Yeah, do you mind if I briefly respond to just the broad comments? So I think as we started off this fiscal 24 audit plan, we said we would like to ask this committee for support in laying a better foundation for our future. Because I think, as we see as a small example here, we're almost outpacing ourselves if we continue to take on projects without the process for how do we handle a myriad of situations. And so I wrote notes, and we'll take all of this because what we are creating is an internal audit manual, because what we want to ensure is that when we are handling situations that we're doing it consistently, we're doing it objectively. Why are my past recommendations going to the audit committee and the board as management? And we want to have a very clear criteria for how we evaluate and move forward in every regard. So that is something we're spending a lot of time on this year. So when we talk administrative process, it would be, and quite frankly, is hypocritical of us to expect processes from other departments while we have very minimal ourselves. So that is the investment the audit committee supported this year in our time to develop our own processes. So we hope to have a subset addressing, especially starting with these key areas. And so we'll share that with you as, either as they're developed at the conclusion of the year to share process, get your feedback if that's an agreeable way to go about things. And then finally, just to bring things full circle, we talked about the organizational risk and how that all fits in. I think when I heard you saying, Ms. Bolton, we want the audit committee to tell the board where should we focus. And so our goal as an internal audit group is to develop a process, a system, a tool so we can get our arms around risks as a district to say to the audit committee, hey, facilities, this is something that we should, as a board, as an audit committee, need to be aware of. And does it require management action? Does it require an internal audit? Does it require what type of, whatever the type of remediation is? So that's kind of how all of these bits and pieces are coming together. And it's just beautiful timing that these conversations are happening at the same time. So I think this is the year, or potentially a couple years, of this type of work coming together.
Great. I think I have 6 o'clock. We still had one line item on the agenda. It was more of an informal financial discussion. As we talked about, we're asking everyone to review the minutes or the recordings of the finance committee meetings. I was going to yield the floor to the board members to see if they have any commentary around the 5-year budget forecast and impacts of the budget process, and just kind of a general anything you want to talk about.
We can make this very, very quick. As you know, 2 Saturdays or so ago, the superintendent and the treasurer presented to a work group of the board the picture as to how much money is, no longer part of our revenue plan, and indeed the kinds of things that we might have to think about cutting or keeping as a result of the end of the ESSER dollars. At that meeting, I think we sensed that the superintendent wanted kind of a green light, and she did not get a green light from the board. Can't look at something for 40 minutes and make a decision like that without any discussion. So that then got carried, and she recognized that, and the treasurer was in that same boat, saying this is just a proposal. This is for you to contemplate and give us advice, kind of. But after that, it then went to finance committee meeting, and we had a good discussion about what we saw. And we also talked about any number of other things, and it came down to the treasurer asking for guidance from the board regarding the 5-year forecast and how we would approach the 5-year forecast, knowing, as you all know, if we show a deficit in a particular year, then ODE asks for a letter of kind of reconciliation, so to speak, or how are you going to fix it, and we could do that. We could also, if I state this correctly, we could also anticipate that these cuts, or these, I should say, don't say the word, that this change of revenue be depicted in the 5-year plan so that we don't go through that with ODE. But to do that, according to the treasurer, we would need to, as a board, make a recommendation and make a decision, not our favorite word, make a decision about whether or not we are committing to having as our budget goal limited to the revenue that we will be bringing in fiscal year 25. So that we would make a commitment to an annual budget, but we said, and it was basically 7-0, went down the road. People were okay after the 2 options by Jen were presented. And so I'm very proud of us for doing that. But we also made it very, very clear that none of the cuts, none of the changes, none of the proposals or recommendations, none of that has happened or is built into our mindset. We just made a commitment to having a balance between the revenue and the budget target for that 1 year. And that then impacts how the 5-year forecast would be. And they've even talked about 2 different 5-year forecasts, even recognizing that. So that's where we are, because all we were doing, when those cuts were mentioned on that Saturday, it started the whole process of mess we went through last year, where people just said, hey, nobody collaborated with us, nobody talked to us, and we're not going to repeat that. So the board has agreed that we will limit our budget for that fiscal 25 to whatever the revenue is. I said last night at the NAACP, we have so much change in revenue, you can't cut that much. You're going to have to, and we've talked about this the last 3 meetings in here, and I'll end it on that if I could, that you have to reorganize and change the way you're doing business. You can't cut all that money without impacting the kids. And so unless you change how we do business, and that falls to the ad hoc committee to give us, I know you suggested some folks that could help us with some facilitation as we get into that kind of deep thought. But that's where we are. And it's also recognizing better use of grants. We've underused our grants, unfortunately. So it's a huge, big picture, but the board did make a commitment regarding revenue and the five-year forecast, and also the revenue for, obviously, for fiscal 25. Is that fair?
Yeah.
All right, thanks for that, Ms. Bolton.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? Okay, thanks
Good
everyone for
meeting.
your time.
Good meeting.
Have a good evening.